He was standing barefoot on red soil, when the Empire ships covered the sky like hungry shadows. He was 16 and believed in heroes. He believed in the stories his mother told him under the warm glow of the lantern, that the Empire protected the weak, that the Empire would save them from the storms that rolled over the horizon like great gray beasts. His father told him that storms were nothing compared to hunger, and hunger was nothing compared to silence, and silence was what the Empire brought when it arrived with its humming ships and blinking lights and banners that snapped in the hot wind. They came without sound, at first the ships, appearing like dark clouds over the hills. The animals were the first to sense them, the goats running in circles, the birds flying low and fast. Then the wind came, and the dust rose, and the village fell quiet. He stood in the field of red soil, watching the shapes in the sky shift and settle and glow faintly. In the morning light he felt his heart pounding in a way that was both fear and wonder, the way a child feels when they see something impossible and think it might be a miracle. The Empire might have been a miracle if it came with food, if it came with water, if it came with medicine for the children who coughed through the night, but it did not come with any of those. It came with men in black suits and silent helmets and long metal rods that buzzed softly. When they passed by, it came with small machines that floated and clicked and scanned the fields as if the fields belonged to them. Now the village elders gathered near the well, their faces tight and tired as they waited for the Empire men to speak. They spoke in a language that was slow and cold. They said, "We come in peace." They said, "We bring order." They said, "You will be protected." And for a moment the boy believed them. For a moment he thought maybe they would help with the crops that kept dying from the dry winds. Maybe they would help with the water that tasted of iron and salt. Maybe they would help with the sickness that took the young ones and the old ones first. But then he saw how the Empire men moved through the village with eyes that did not see them, with hands that took whatever they wanted, with machines that marked the houses that would be emptied first. He saw the way the Empire ships settled over the village like predators, waiting for something to move, the way the elders bowed their heads lower and lower, as the Empire men spoke in that cold, slow voice, telling them about taxes, telling them about quotas, telling them about loyalty and compliance and consequences. And he felt the wonder drain from him, replaced by something sharp and cold in his chest. He saw his mother holding his baby sister tighter as the Empire men walked past without looking at them. He saw his father clutching the small bag of seeds. He was planning to trade for sugar. His father did not trade that day. The Empire men took the seeds and moved on, leaving the father with empty hands and eyes that no longer held the quiet patience they once did. The boy looked at the Empire ships again, and they no longer looked like miracles. They looked like storms. They looked like hunger. They looked like silence. The Empire came with banners and gifts, but the gifts were weapons and the banners were warnings. The boy watched them from the edge of the red soil fields as they built their tall towers with blinking lights. The towers hummed at night, a low vibration that crawled into the bones of the people and kept them awake. The Empire said the towers would help the crops grow. The Empire said the towers would clean the water. The Empire said many things with calm voices that never changed, no matter how many mothers cried or how many fathers begged. The boys saw how the Empire men smiled without their eyes when they handed out small boxes to the families in the square. The boxes were heavy and cold, and inside them were metal pieces. The boy did not understand. The Empire said these would keep them safe. The boys saw the men teaching some of the older boys how to use the metal pieces, how to hold them, how to point them, how to make the loud noise that made the birds scatter from the rooftops. He saw the faces of the older boys change as they learned how to use the metal pieces. Their laughter turned sharp. Their eyes turned cold. The boy kept to the fields, kept to the edges, because he did not want the metal pieces. He wanted the water to taste clean again. He wanted his sister to stop coughing at night. He wanted to see his mother smile, the way she did before the Empire came. But the Empire did not bring smiles. The Empire brought the quiet that fell over the village. After the first family was taken, the family had argued with the Empire men about the water, about the seeds, about the taxes. The Empire men did not argue back. They came at night, their boots silent, their lights bright. They took the family from their small house by the well. The boy heard the screams, but no one else came out to help. No one else opened their doors. No one else made a sound. The next morning the house was empty, the doors swinging in the breeze. The boy saw the mother of the taken family, sitting in the dust near the well, her eyes open but seeing nothing. The Empire men walked past her. Without looking, the boy asked his father where the family had gone. His father did not answer. He only shook his head and walked back to the field. With the empty seed bag, the boy asked his mother why the Empire was here. If they were not helping, she pulled him close and told him to be quiet, that the Empire was always listening, that the Empire was not here to help, that the Empire was here to take what it wanted. The boy looked at the towers that hummed and blinked and reached into the sky like broken fingers, and he felt the cold, sharp thing in his chest. Again he watched the older boys with the metal pieces standing near the Empire, men, their eyes looking past the village, looking past the people who raised them. The boy understood then that the gifts were not gifts. They were chains, that the banners were not promises, they were threats, and that the Empire did not come to protect them, the Empire came to claim them. The boy stood on the red soil and watched the ships overhead, waiting for the next family to disappear, waiting for the next promise to turn into silence. He saw his father kneel before Empire soldiers, holding a sack of grain, asking them to leave enough for the village, asking them to have mercy on the children, who had not eaten for 2 days. The Empire soldiers did not speak. They took the grain and walked away, their boots leaving marks in the dust that the wind could not erase. The boy stood near the broken fence, watching his father remain on his knees even after the soldiers were gone. The sack of grain had been the last hope for trading salt for medicine for his sister, who was coughing so hard at night that the boy would press his hands over his ears to keep the sound from breaking him, but the coughing still found him in the dark, reminding him that the Empire had taken the seeds and the grain. And now, the hope. His mother came out from the small house and placed a hand on the father's shoulder, but he did not look up. He kept his eyes on the dust where the soldiers' boots had passed. The boy turned his eyes to the sky, where the Empire's ships floated like silent watchers, their lights blinking in patterns he could not understand. The ships did not move, they only hovered above the village, waiting for something. The boy felt like they were waiting for the village to break, for the people to kneel and never rise again. The boy felt something hot in his chest, something that made his hands shake as he clenched them at his sides. He ran from the house, he ran past the empty fields, he ran to the edge of the village, where the Empire towers hummed. He stood there in the shadow of the towers, feeling the vibration in his bones. He wondered if the towers could hear his thoughts, if the towers could feel his anger, if the towers could see that he was not afraid of them the way the adults were. But he was afraid. The boy could not lie to himself. He was afraid every time he saw the Empire soldiers walking through the village with their black suits and their cold eyes. He was afraid every time he heard the quiet at night, when no one dared to speak, when the coughing was the only sound. The boy remembered the stories his mother told him before the Empire came, stories about how the village had once been a place of songs and laughter, how the people would dance in the rain when it came, how the children would run through the fields chasing each other under the blue sky. But now the sky was gray with the shadow of the ships, and the fields were empty, and the rain did not come, and the songs were silent. The boy turned away from the towers and walked back to the house where his mother was waiting. By the door she looked at him with tired eyes and opened her arms, and he let her hold him. He let her press her hand to the back of his head, the way she did when he was small, the way she did when she was trying to keep the world from breaking him. The boy closed his eyes and felt her tears on his cheek, and he knew she was afraid too. He knew the whole village was afraid, but he also knew something else. He knew that fear was not enough to stop what was coming. He knew that the Empire would take everything if they let it, and he knew that he could not let them take everything, even if he was only a boy standing barefoot on red soil under a silent sky. He ran to the hills where the wind was cold, carrying a radio that barely worked, whispering into it every night, asking Earth for help, telling Earth about the hunger, telling Earth about the empty houses, telling Earth about the children who did not wake up from their sleep. The radio crackled and hissed, but sometimes he heard a voice, a soft voice that said, "We hear you," a soft voice that said, "Stay strong," a soft voice that said, "Help is coming." And he believed that voice because he needed to believe that someone was listening, that someone would care about the small village under the shadow of the Empire ships. He climbed the rocks each night to find a place where the signal was stronger, where the stars were clearer, where he could see the lights of the Empire towers blinking like warnings against the dark sky. He pressed the button on the radio and told the voice about the cold, about the sickness, about the way the Empire soldiers took the last goats, about the way his father no longer looked at him, about the way his mother cried when she thought he was asleep. He told the voice everything because the hills could not listen, and the wind could not answer, and the silence of the village was becoming too heavy for him to carry alone. The voice always answered softly, never with anger, never with fear. The voice said, "We are coming." The voice said, "We will help." The voice said you are not forgotten. The boy closed his eyes and held the radio close to his chest, believing that Earth would come, that Earth would send ships, that Earth would bring food and water, that Earth would tell the Empire to leave them alone. He would go back to the village in the morning, with dust on his clothes and cold in his bones, and he would look at the empty streets and the closed doors, and he would tell his mother that Earth was coming, that help was near, and she would smile for a moment, a small, tired smile that would disappear as quickly as it came. The boy would watch the Empire soldiers walking past the well, their black suits catching the pale light, their cold eyes looking at nothing and everything. He would hold the radio in his pocket, feeling the weight of it like a promise that someone far away cared about them, that someone far away would save them. But each day the Empire took more. They took the last chickens, they took the last barrels of water, they took the young men who were strong enough to work and carried them away in their humming ships. The boy watched them leave, and he pressed the button on the radio, telling the voice that the Empire was taking everyone, telling the voice that they needed help now, telling the voice that the village was dying. The voice answered, always soft, always calm, saying we are coming, saying hold on, saying you are brave. And the boy wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that the ships that covered the stars would one day leave, that the fields would grow again, that the laughter would return. But the towers kept humming, the ships kept hovering, and the silence kept growing in the spaces where voices used to be. Earth was watching, Earth was counting resources, Earth was afraid of losing fuel lines and trade routes. Earth sent soft voices that said, be patient, we will help. But help never came, only the Empire came, and took more. The boy would stand at the edge of the field each morning, watching the Empire soldiers walk through the village, taking what they wanted, taking what they said was owed to them, taking without looking at the faces of the people they left behind. The boy would watch the sky, hoping to see ships from Earth, hoping to see the promise of rescue, but only the Empire ships floated in the gray light like dark birds, waiting to strike. The radio still whispered at night, the soft voice saying, we are coming, the soft voice saying, we see you, the soft voice saying you are not alone. But the boy was alone. He was alone. When he held his sister's hand as she coughed until she could not cough anymore. He was alone when he helped his mother wrap the small body in a thin blanket, because there was nothing else to do. He was alone when his father stood in the doorway, staring at the hills with empty eyes. The boy would press the button on the radio, with shaking hands, telling the voice that his sister was gone, telling the voice that the water was gone, telling the voice that the seeds were gone, telling the voice that the hope was gone. The voice would answer softly, saying, we are coming. But the boy could hear the lie hidden in the softness. He could hear the fear that Earth had for the Empire. He could hear the distance in the promise that help would come. The boy would bury his sister under the old tree near the field, where the ground was still soft, where the wind still sang through the leaves, where the sun still found a way to shine. The boy would place a small stone on the mound and promised her that he would not forget, that he would not let the Empire take everything. The boy would go back to the house, where his mother sat holding a piece of cloth that once belonged to the little girl. The mother would not speak, the father would not speak. The house was silent except for the sound of the wind and the soft hum of the Empire towers in the distance. The boy would take the radio to the hills each night, pressing the button and telling the voice about the day, telling the voice about the silence, telling the voice about the fear, telling the voice about the promise he made to his sister. The voice would always answer softly, saying, we are coming, saying we see you, saying hold on. But the boy could see that Earth was watching and choosing silence. The boy could see that Earth was counting what it would lose if it angered the Empire. The boy could see that Earth was afraid of the Empire the same way the village was afraid of the Empire. The boy would look at the stars and wonder if they were watching too, if they saw the small village under the ships, if they saw the boy with the radio, if they saw the promise he made to never let the Empire take everything, even if it meant he would stand alone under the cold wind, waiting for Earth to remember its promise. One night he returned to the village and found it empty, doors open, fires still burning, no screams, no sounds. The Empire had come in the dark. When the wind was high, when the stars were hidden behind clouds, he saw footprints in the dust leading away from the houses, small footprints, large footprints, all going in the same direction, toward the humming towers, toward the waiting ships. The goats were wandering in the streets, bleating in confusion. The dogs were barking at shadows. The boy walked through the village, calling out for his mother, calling out for his father, calling out for anyone, but the silence was thicker than the dust, thicker than the fear, thicker than the darkness. The boy stepped into his house and found the small bundle of cloth that had belonged to his sister lying on the floor, as if it had been dropped in haste, as if she had come back to take it before the Empire took them all. He picked it up and held it to his chest, breathing in the faint scent of his mother. The scent of earth, the scent of safety that no longer existed. He walked through the house, touching the empty spaces where his family used to sit, where the warmth used to live, where laughter sometimes returned even after the Empire came. He stepped outside and looked at the sky, and the towers were blinking and the ships were waiting. The boy knew they had taken the people he knew. They had come with their silent boots and their cold eyes and their black suits, and they had gathered the people, with their weapons, with their orders, with their promises of work, with their threats of violence. He knew they had taken them, and the people had gone because there was nothing left to fight. With no food, no water, no hope, the boy walked to the well, and saw the buckets still swinging as if someone had tried to draw water before the Empire came. He looked into the dark water and saw his reflection, a thin face, tired eyes, dust in his hair, the reflection of a boy who had lost everything but who was still standing. The boy turned away from the well and walked through the village, seeing the fires still burning, seeing the doors still open, seeing the toys left in the dust, seeing the bread left uneaten on a small table, seeing the shoes left near the doorway, as if the people would come back, as if the people would walk back into their homes and close the doors and light the fires and eat the bread and sing the songs. The boy knew they would not come back. The boy knew the Empire did not bring people back. The boy walked to the edge of the village, where the fields of red soil met the empty road, and he sat down holding the small cloth to his chest. He looked at the blinking towers and the hovering ships, and he pressed the button on the radio, and he told the soft voice that the village was empty, that the people were gone, that he was alone now, that he did not know what to do. The soft voice answered, saying, "We are coming," but the boy did not believe it anymore, and the wind blew through the empty village, carrying the smoke of the fires, carrying the scent of the dust, carrying the silence that was now the only thing that belonged to the village. The boy woke before dawn, cold dust in his mouth, eyes burning from the smoke of fires that still smoldered in the empty village. He listened for footsteps, for voices, for the soft call of his mother telling him to wake up, for the soft laughter of his sister playing with stones near the door, but the wind was the only sound. The towers hummed in the distance, blinking their cold light into the gray morning. He stood up holding the small cloth close to his chest, walking through the village, one last time, past the empty houses, past the well where the rope still swayed, past the fence where the goats no longer waited for him to bring water. He felt the silence pressing against him, heavy like the hunger that never left his belly, heavy like the fear that never left his chest. He turned on the radio, pressing the button with trembling fingers, telling the soft voice that the village was gone, telling the soft voice that the Empire had taken everyone, telling the soft voice that he was alone. The soft voice answered, "We are coming, hold on, we see you, we are close." But the boy could hear the distance in the voice, the hesitation in the promise, the fear in the silence between the words. He looked at the sky, waiting for ships, waiting for hope, but the sky only held the Empire, waiting with its ships, watching with its cold eyes, waiting for him to break, waiting for him to kneel. The boy walked away from the village, away from the empty doors and the ashes of the fires, away from the memories that clung to the walls like ghosts. He walked toward the towers where the Empire held the people, where the Empire kept its promises of work and survival, where the Empire kept its threats and weapons and silence. He walked because there was nothing else left to do, because he had promised his sister that he would not let the Empire take everything, because he had promised himself that he would not kneel even if he was afraid, even if he was hungry, even if he was alone. He walked through the dust, the cloth pressed to his chest, the radio cold in his hand, the towers growing larger with each step, their hum growing louder, crawling into his bones, filling the empty spaces left by the silence. He reached the edge of the Empire camp, where the towers pulsed with light and the soldiers moved like shadows and the machines clicked and scanned the ground. He hid behind a broken wall, watching them, watching the people in lines, heads down, eyes empty, the people who once laughed and sang and danced in the rain, now standing in silence, waiting for the Empire to decide who would work, who would eat, who would disappear next. The boy pressed the button on the radio, whispering to the soft voice, telling it what he saw, telling it that the people were still alive, telling it that the people were waiting, telling it that the people had not yet disappeared into the silence. The soft voice answered, "We see you, hold on, we are close, we are coming." But the boy did not look at the sky this time. He kept his eyes on the people, kept his eyes on the soldiers, kept his eyes on the towers, because he knew that if Earth would not save them, then he would have to try, even if he was only a boy with dust on his feet and hunger in his belly and fear in his heart. The boy hid among the broken walls and rusted metal, watching the Empire soldiers move like dark shadows under the towers. He saw his father in the line, head bent, shoulders heavy, as if the weight of the sky rested there. He saw his mother holding her hands together as if in prayer, eyes closed, lips moving without sound. He wanted to run to them, to shout their names, to break the silence that the Empire wrapped around them like a chain, but he stayed hidden, clutching the small cloth to his chest, feeling the rough edges against his skin, the radio pressed to his ear, whispering static, the soft voice saying, "We are coming, hold on, we see you." But the boy no longer waited for that promise. He watched the soldiers drag people to the ships, watched them separate the old, the sick, the strong, the silent, watched them push a young boy not much older than him to his knees, pressed a cold barrel against his neck because he stumbled, because he cried, because he did not move fast enough. The boy covered his mouth with the cloth to keep his breath inside, to keep the scream from bursting out of his chest. He knew if he ran, if he stood, if he shouted his name, the soldiers would turn, the soldiers would silence him too, so he stayed hidden. But his heart screamed louder than his voice ever could. His hands shook, but his eyes stayed open, watching, learning, counting how many soldiers, how many guns, how many shadows, how the towers blinked in patterns, how the ships opened and closed like hungry mouths swallowing hope. He pressed the button on the radio and whispered to the soft voice, asking, "What do I do now?" Asking, "How do I fight?" Asking if Earth even cared. The soft voice only said, "Hold on, we see you, we are coming." The same promise, the same softness, but the boy was tired of soft words, tired of waiting, tired of holding the fear like a stone in his chest. So he stopped pressing the button. He turned the radio off. He held the small cloth tighter and watched the shadows move. He remembered the stories his mother told him before the Empire came, stories of old ways, of hidden places in the hills, of tunnels under the fields of fire, buried in oil drums, left by the first settlers when they were free. He remembered how his father used to point at the old well near the tree and say, "There is more under the earth than you know, boy." He remembered how his sister used to laugh when he hid in the tunnels to scare her when they played before the Empire, before the silence, before the ships. The boy looked at the towers, blinking like eyes in the dark, and he knew what he would do. He knew he could not break the Empire alone. He knew he could not save everyone alone, but he could light a match in the dark. He could crack the silence with fire. He could take back one breath of freedom, even if it cost him everything. The boy crawled from the broken wall, keeping to the shadows, moving through the dust, whispering his sister's name with each step. The cloth pressed to his chest, a promise that the Empire would not keep everything, that Earth would not get to pretend it did not see, that even the smallest voice could burn like a star when pushed against the dark. The boy moved through the dark like a shadow among shadows, dust clinging to his skin, the cloth pressed to his chest, the towers blinking above him, like cold stars watching every step he took. He remembered the tunnels under the fields, how his father once showed him the rusted doors hidden by stones, how the tunnels led to the old tanks buried in the red earth, filled with fuel that no one used anymore because the Empire brought its own power. But the old power still slept under the soil, waiting. The boy found the entrance near the tree where his sister now slept, the wind whispering through the branches as if telling him to be careful, as if telling him to be brave. He moved the stones one by one with shaking hands, sliding the heavy door open, feeling the cold air from the tunnels brushing against his face. Like a memory of rain, he climbed down into the dark, the radio silent in his pocket, the soft voice replaced by the pounding of his heart. He lit the small lamp and followed the narrow path, the walls rough, the air heavy with the scent of old oil and dust. He found the tanks, their surfaces cold and silent, the smell sharp in his nose, reminding him of the stories of fire, the stories of how the first settlers had fought to keep their land before the Empire came, before Earth turned away. The boy placed the small cloth on the tank, a promise, a prayer, a goodbye. He pressed his hand to it, whispering to his sister, whispering to his mother, whispering to his father, that he was not afraid anymore, that he would not let the Empire take everything, that he would not let the silence be the last word. He climbed out of the tunnel, sealing the door behind him, walking through the shadows toward the towers where the people stood in lines, where the soldiers moved with cold eyes, where the Empire ships waited to swallow hope again. He saw his father standing near the edge of the line, eyes empty, shoulders bent. He saw his mother, her hands still clasped together, her lips moving without sound. He moved closer, staying in the shadows, close enough to see them, close enough to let them see him. When the time came, he pulled the radio from his pocket, turning it on, pressing the button, the soft voice whispering, "We are coming, hold on, we see you." And for the first time the boy answered with a steady voice, "Do you see me now?" He pressed the button 3 times. just as his father once taught him. When they signaled from the hills, the towers blinked in the dark, the ships hovering above like waiting vultures. The boy closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the wind on his face, feeling the dust on his skin, feeling the fire inside him, waiting to wake. He opened his eyes and saw his father lift his head, saw his mother open her eyes, saw them see him standing in the dust, holding the radio, holding the promise, holding the match. Against the dark, he pressed the final button, the signal sent to the old machines under the ground. The signal sent to the sleeping fire, the signal that cracked the silence with light. The ground shook, the towers screamed, the sky burned, and for a moment the Empire stepped back. The ships lifted higher, the soldiers turned their cold eyes wide, and the people looked up at the boy who did not kneel, the boy who did not run, the boy who lit the darkness so the world would see that even when Earth forgot them, even when the Empire tried to erase them, a single voice could still set the sky on fire.